Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Cooper. I am the lead of the Forest Carbon and Climate Program at Michigan State University. And we are so pleased to be coming to the end of the 2018-2019 Learning Exchange Series for the Forest Climate Working Group. And we've really enjoyed being the host. For those who are new to the webinars, new to this series, the Forest Climate Working Group is a diverse group of forest interests, including landowners, industry, conservationists, academia, and those active with carbon markets. The group has worked together for 10 years to advocate for state and federal policies that work to ensure sustainable forest use and prevention of land use change. We've been in a process of reinvigorating our focus and activities, and we do welcome inquiries into our work. So please reach out if you have any questions or you think that your organization may be interested in learning more. I have the full lineup here of the series, and you'll see that we are down to our last two speakers, last two but not least, and we'll introduce the speaker shortly, but we want to highlight these because we do have all of the past webinars recorded and uploaded onto our website. So if you see a topic here that's of interest, please know that you can still have access to that learning material and review that. Our next Learning Exchange series will take place on July 10th, and this will So this will feature Sarah Westcott of Climate Action Reserve. Sarah will be presenting on carbon market opportunities and project development tools for forest owners. You can register for this session today at our website or by clicking a registration link set in our follow-up email. And please note that when you do register, you get a calendar invite and reminders about the upcoming webinar so that it'll make sure that you know what's coming up. To get to today's speaker, we are so pleased to introduce Michael Catania, Executive Director of Duke Farms, who will be presenting on natural climate solutions in the state of New Jersey using a case study of Duke Farms. As a reminder, and for those new to joining, we do, our format is we have a presentation from our speaker, and then we have a Q&A session at the end. You can submit questions at any point. And if you have joined by phone, please feel free to email forestc@msu.edu. We're really excited to let Michael get started, but we also want to point out that attendees today that are affiliated with Society of American Foresters will receive 1 CFE credit. If you have signed up with your email address that is linked to your SAF account, this will be credited to you automatically. But for those interested, please reach out to us at forestc@msu.edu if you have any questions. Again, as we mentioned, the previous recordings are available, and this one will be as well. So this session is being recorded and will be posted on our website along with any supplemental resources such as the presentation slides within about a week or so. If you've registered, you'll receive an email letting you know when this is available. And again, we'll save about 10-15 minutes at the end for a Q&A. And we do encourage you to submit questions at any time. So we don't typically interrupt the speaker, but we will organize them and present them to the speaker at the end. And in the case of outstanding questions, we will get those put into a Word document and share them with the speaker so we can get written responses and post those with the recorded presentation. And so I think with that, we are ready to hand over the screen. Michael, will you please share your presentation and give us some information about New Jersey and the Duke Farms?
All right, thank you, Lauren. Delighted to be here today. And I'm going to focus mostly on a case study of Duke Farms, but more broadly talk about what's going on in the state of New Jersey. And for a little bit of background, after an 8-year hiatus where we had been serving as a leader on climate issues in our legislation and our participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Compact, we withdrew 8 years ago, actually 10 years ago, and are in the process of rejoining that. So we're playing a bit of catch-up ball here, and I'll walk through some of the things that are going on right now in that catch-up. Little bit of background on Duke Farms. Duke Farms is a nonprofit organization. We are an operating foundation of the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. The farm comprises 2,742 acres that we are filling up with demonstration projects. Our mission is to be a leader and a model of stewardship and sustainability. So a lot of that is really more and more focusing on climate change. So let me get into things. And I'll just start with, I suspect that most of the people listening in today are already preaching to the converted, but climate change is obviously real, it's happening, and it's affecting New Jersey to a certain degree disproportionate to other states. As you probably know, we've not only crossed the 400 parts per million threshold, but we're up to 414 parts per million as of May 29. So we're into kind of unprecedented territory, and it's very worrisome. New Jersey is following the global and the national trends in terms of upward trends of our warming. More rapid warming, particularly since 1970. The 7 warmest years have occurred just since 1998. 2012 was the warmest year on record, and I have no doubt that we'll be beating that in the next couple of years. So we have larger warming trends in winter than in summer. So our winters are getting warmer, and the variability of year-to-year temperature is greater in the winter. We've had the 4 warmest winters we've ever had since 1998, and the 7 warmest summers since 1999. So here's an interesting map that shows days above 100 degrees. If you have any doubts about why climate change is going to have an impact, this shows the number of days with a color chart where the temperature is above 100 degrees. This is current, 1991 to 2010. By 2100, this is what the U.S. is going to look like. And if you look at New Jersey, we're into between 25 and 50 days over 100 degrees. That will pose just incredible challenges to virtually every kind of human activity. We're also seeing changes in our annual precipitation. In fact, last year, we usually get between 44 and 48 inches of precipitation. We had 73 inches last year. So there's an upward trend, but more importantly, the trend is really coming in terms of precipitation, coming more and more from heavy events. And you see New Jersey is part of the Northeast where 71% of our precipitation is coming from very heavy events. Again, that presents huge challenges, particularly in a state like New Jersey, that is the most densely populated state in the nation, where we have almost completely developed our floodplains. We have a large coastal area that's almost completely developed. So this is going to, present some very, very serious challenges. So our heavier rains are going to become heavier. Our dry spells are going to lengthen. And some of the specific things we'll see is more warm extremes and fewer cold extremes. Heavier rains are going to become more intense, more frequent dry spells, rising sea levels, and we also have subsiding land here in New Jersey with this increased frequency and intensity of coastal and riverine flooding. So definitely time to take things seriously. So fortunately, New Jersey already has excellent legislation. We have the Global Warming Response Act and the Global Warming Response Fund, but we basically have taken an 8-year hiatus from implementing it and are just in a new administration coming back to some of the things that the legislature set in motion. So this means that we need to reduce emissions to the maximum extent possible and to dramatically reduce or even abandon our use of fossil fuels in the near future. But we're finding out that from the projections, even that may not be enough to really soften that curve and avoid some of the catastrophic impacts. So that means we need to significantly reduce emissions to the maximum extent possible and figure out a way to remove carbon from our atmosphere. Fortunately, we've had a group of people over the last 8 years, working kind of like the monks in the Dark Ages to continue the science and to do some policy analysis. I happen to have the privilege of serving as the co-chair of the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance. We've actually changed our name from not just adaptation, but to include mitigation. And this is a group of about 60 stakeholders, academics, local elected officials, emergency response managers, nonprofit organizations, environmental justice group, utilities, and other corporate interests that have banded together to really kind of look into what our policy options are. We've issued a series of white papers. We hold conferences. And here's the website here. You should check it out. There's a number of excellent white papers and policy analysis options on that website. So now I'd like to kind of turn to Duke Farms and talk about what our overall strategy is for addressing climate change here. And it includes, obviously, energy conservation, trying to analyze and reduce our carbon footprint, maximize our use of renewable energy, revise our landscaping and farming practices so that we can start turning Duke Farms into a carbon sink and sequester as much carbon as possible, but also share these lessons, both our successes and failures, with the public and with the professionals through training programs here. So we're on an 8-step program. It sounds like a weight reduction program, and in a way it is. We're actually at step 5 now. We've done a lot in reducing our overall emissions. In terms of using natural climate solutions, we first had to control the overabundance of white-tailed deer here. And 10 years ago, we put up a deer fence and launched a very serious deer management program. It's very hard to grow trees or restore things if you have deer that are overgrazing them. Then we started to engage with academic partners to establish rigorous baseline values. And I believe one of our academic partners, Stephanie Murphy, may be on the call today. We've recently engaged a team of 10 or 11 scientists at Rutgers to help us with establishing baseline values for various areas throughout Duke Farms, and also establishing test plots to start monitoring the amount of carbon that we're building up in our soils and vegetation. We'll continue doing that over time, compare notes with partners, and try and hone best management practices, and then export and share those practices, integrate them into our public and professional programs, and try and serve as a demonstration of the path to carbon neutrality and carbon negativity. So we started with energy audits. We have 45 principal structures at Duke Farms that range from 2 LEED platinum buildings to 100-year-old stone buildings. And now we're in phase 2 of implementing energy conservation measures to lower our usage. We did this interesting energy map with one of our consultants. We are both an energy producer and energy user here. And we have something very close to our own microgrid with our own utilities here. But what we realized is that it was hard to get a handle on the amount of energy we're using and the carbon we were producing because we had a lot of master meters and we couldn't monitor usage at the source. So one of our first steps was installing sub-meters, which we're pretty well through now. Then we looked at our carbon sources, and as you would expect, use of heating fuels produces about 50% of our carbon. Vehicles and equipment, another 25%, and electric usage, another 25%. That was a particular problem when we couldn't really meter electric usage at the source or heat sources in individual buildings, which we've largely gotten over now. So we started to look for the low-hanging fruit of what we could look at, and you'll see that the use of natural gas for heating collectively makes up about 45% of our emissions. And one of the surprises here was use of gasoline by employee vehicles made up about 15%. So we intend to pursue a 3-phased approach. First, to get our operations carbon neutral and hopefully carbon negative, and then to take our employee commuting into account and try and go neutral and negative there. And then since we attract a lot of visitors here, between 300,000 and 400,000 visitors a year, we'd like to see if we can turn the property into big enough carbon sink to offset those emissions as well. And that's going to be a very significant challenge and take a while. So part of our energy conservation program is to reduce our gasoline vehicle fleet. We have a fleet of global environment motor cars, electric vehicle charging station, preferential parking for hybrids and electric vehicles. We've tried some incentives for mass transit. And again, here's Prius Row in our parking lot, which are the closest spaces. and you think this isn't a significant incentive, you should come here on Sunday when people are into overflow parking and see how far you have to walk. So if you have a Prius or an electric vehicle, you get better parking here. We're also in the process of electrifying as much as we can. Since we have our own solar array, whatever we can electrify is essentially carbon free. So we're doing all of our tools, lawn mowers, trimmers, things like that. And again, these are used in a place where there's lots of public visibility. So we're trying to get the message out, and these are things that people can emulate to reduce their own carbon footprint. Trying to maximize our renewable energy through a solar array, geothermal wells, encouraging people to hike, and we have our own bike share program. And then we're hoping to do some demonstrations of bird-friendly wind power as well as hydropower. We have some interesting little uses of solar power. This is a little booster for the heating system. We have an orchid range. It's actually a LEED Platinum conservatory. That seems like an oxymoron. I understand why. But we preheat the water that goes into the boiler, and it dramatically reduces the amount of natural gas needed to maintain temperature in the orchid range. Our solar array takes up 2.6 acres, provides 640 kilowatts of power, and right now it gives us about 50% of the electric usage here. We'd like to double or even triple that, and we're looking into appropriate locations to do that. The building that I'm sitting in right now, our visitor center, is heated and cooled by 56 400 deep geothermal wells that, with the assistance of heat pumps, extract both heating and cooling at different times of year. It's a fairly sophisticated technical system, but it works pretty well. And then we do almost 400 educational programs a year here for the general public, as well as short courses, professional training, especially for teachers, but for environmental professionals of every type. Lots of demonstration projects, both emissions reductions and natural climate solutions. So you can take a break during a class or a program here and go out and see something that we've been talking about. We make our facilities available for conferences and workshops for mission-related nonprofits, profits, and government agencies. We have a huge community garden program and a farmer's market to promote local food production and with the beneficial climate implications that that has. So I'm going to go to natural climate solutions a bit now. As I said, we're more and more coming around to the point of view that no matter how much we ratchet down emissions, we're still going to need to get carbon out of the air. And so there's been a lot of academic thinking and publications recently about how much can nature contribute. One paper in particular, which is co-authored by about 20 people, is called Natural Climate Solutions, and that is estimated that we can probably contribute about a third of what we need to reach the Paris Accords, staying below that 2% centigrade temperature increase pathway. So here's a nice chart that shows kind of where we are, where business as usual would be. And with natural climate solutions, we can mitigate about a third of what we need to do. So that's a serious contribution that we have to learn more about. And probably the biggest thing we need is real demonstration projects that are monitored in a scientifically valid way. So Duke Farms is one of a handful of facilities in the Northeast that is taking this very serious and trying to have a very rigorous monitoring program to really measure both baseline values and then how much carbon we are building up in our soils and vegetation. So we're very excited about this initiative, and really this is a great opportunity to share it with a lot of people, because we see this as something that needs to be done on a widespread basis, not instead of reducing emissions, but to complement very significant emissions reductions. So if we get to 1/3 of our climate solutions from natural climate solutions, that's a really nice contribution. So I actually met Lauren Cooper last summer when she was the expert facilitator for a breakout group that I had, the U.S. Climate Alliance had a natural and working lands learning lab, and they invited all of the states participating in the U.S. Climate Alliance. I think it was 16 at the time. I believe we're up to 24 now with recent elections and administration changes. So we spent 3 days in Washington looking at different pathways for how we could use natural climate solutions in our respective states. And I helped put together a delegation of 5 people from New Jersey, both from DEP, from academia, and from some nonprofits, working closely with our governor's office and our Department of Environmental Protection. And we came up with a series of recommendations on the things that we thought would work best here in New Jersey. All the other 15 states did the same thing. So it was actually, I don't think I've been with as hopeful a group of people and as knowledgeable a group of people on climate issues ever before in my life. It really made me come away thinking that it's not too late. We really can address this issue if we start to work on it now. So let me walk you through the 3 types of actions in terms of natural climate solutions we're really talking about. One is to protect intact ecosystems, which are natural carbon sinks. The other is to restore native ecosystems, which have had their ability to store carbon degraded because of changes in them. And the other is to improve practices on working lands, both farmlands, rangelands, as well as working forests. We don't have a big forestry industry in New Jersey, but we have about 1/3 of our state's 5 million acres that have been permanently preserved either as open space or farmland, and a lot of that is forests. And how we manage that can really determine how much contribution we can get from natural climate solutions. So here at Duke Farms, when we talk about natural climate solutions, we're talking about the 590 acres of restored wetlands that are in the Federal Wetlands Reserve Program, the 370 acres that we've already placed in the Federal Grassland Reserve Program, and we have another 400 or 500 acres of grasslands and we hope to get into that program in the future. We've already planted more than 340,000 native trees and shrubs. As you can imagine, with a white-tailed deer overabundance problem, we had a browse line that started about 6 foot up from the ground, and there was basically no regeneration of trees here at all. But with 10 years of a very aggressive deer management program, the property is now regenerating. We've done a lot of plantings. The native seed bank has come back, and we have lots of young trees. In fact, we have the hunters complain that the vegetation is so dense they can't see the deer, and it's difficult to hunt. We had to explain to them that that was the purpose of the program. We've also converted more than 250 acres of turf grass to native meadows. This was a manicured estate, back in the day, and there were about 350 acres of turf lawns. And when you think about the carbon implications of that, you've got this monoculture that you're fertilizing with, petroleum hydrocarbon fertilizers. You're also using things that emit carbon to control weeds, and then you're bringing out an army of gas or diesel-driven lawnmowers to cut it and to maintain it. So when we can take 250 acres of turf grass and convert it to native meadows, the savings are truly amazing. And we're starting to document that now, what the avoided carbon is, and starting to integrate that into our programs. We're also looking, and we've already implemented it, changing a number of our farming practices by going organic. It's a lot like the turf grass conversion, using cover crops, low or no-till farming, as well as rotational grazing. And I'll talk more about all of these in a minute. So working with Rutgers, we have just launched the first year of what we hope will be a 5-year initial program and then monitored periodically to take a look at how much we can use natural climate solutions. So just as an aside, if natural climate solutions can provide 1/3 of the solution to stabilizing our climate, it's interesting that natural climate solutions are the subject of less than 1% of public discussion, and they enjoy just 3% of public funding. So there's clearly a disparity there. that we need to start addressing. So that third of the solution can have the same impact as taking 650 million cars off the road. So nature really is our forgotten ally here, and it's time to kind of turn that around and to really harness nature to benefit our climate change efforts. So I've been making the rounds with landowners and nonprofits and farmers, talking about the benefits, the advantages and the co-benefits of carbon farming. So even if you're not really interested in addressing climate change, there are lots of co-benefits that come with it. Lowering inputs, it means lower expenses and higher profits if you're a for-profit, or just lower expenses if you're a not-for-profit. It means improved resilience to erratic weather. We've already had enough experience with the erratic weather from more violent storms, heavier rainfalls, followed by longer droughts. So who wouldn't want more resilience from that kind of weather? It can lower your energy costs, pollination benefits. We've had a particular problem with pollinators, and by implementing natural climate solutions, you're providing better habitat for native pollinators. It's also a challenge, particularly when I talk to farmers or people who are engaged in forestry. They perceive themselves as rugged individuals who are very ingenious and can innovate and solve their own problems. And so I like to tell these people, if ever we needed you, it would be now. It's time to figure out natural solutions, and it's time to figure out how to lower your carbon footprint. And that can have some advantages in terms of marketing as free range, bird friendly, organic, or climate friendly. I think increasingly there's going to be more public attention paid to that, and more business for people who can demonstrate that they're doing their part and then some. It's also very compatible with educational efforts and with tourism efforts. And having a base of a third of our land area permanently preserved gives us a real opportunity to use those as laboratories and to educate the people who visit those farms, who hike and bike and enjoy the forests and the fields that have been preserved, how we can manage those in a way that solves our problems rather than exacerbates our problems. There's also some potential financial incentives here, sale of development easements through our state program, county programs, also federal programs run by the NRCS. Other NRCS and Farm Services Administration grant programs like EQIP or CREP will pay farmers by the acre for implementing certain practices that can contribute to natural climate solutions. We've had a voluntary carbon credit market that hasn't gone very far when federal cap and trade legislation died, but that could turn around in a hurry if we reverse that. There's also some active voluntary markets, and we have a handful of landowners in New Jersey who have taken advantage of that. And now that we're getting back in RGGI, as I'll discuss at the end of my presentation, there's an opportunity to use some RGGI auction proceeds to restore particularly forested areas. So this partnership with Rutgers that we've launched, as I said, is a multi-year experiment to set up baseline data so we can understand our existing carbon stocks and the fluxes that they go through for the various habitats and land management practices at New Jersey. So this is an overhead shot here. On the right is our floodplain. We have 3.5 miles of floodplain along the Raritan River. For the past 100 years, these were ag-modified wetlands. They were tile drained, and corn and soybeans were planted there. So through the federal Wetlands Restoration program, we ripped up the tile drains, we established some microtopography, and they're now native grasslands that will succeed to a riparian forest, which is what they want to be and what we really want, what we really need them to be. The slide on the left is some of our grasslands, which now that we've restored these grasslands and have native warm season grasses there, the root systems and the bacteria in those root systems, we hope to demonstrate are storing a lot more carbon. Other baseline sampling locations will include some of the remaining farming areas, as well as some of our forests. And this is a good shot of some of the new forest regeneration that we're getting now that we've controlled white-tailed deer. So this is really all about essentially soil carbon and getting a handle on soil carbon and learning how to turn the property into a carbon sink. There's a really nice quote on the right-hand side of this slide. A mere 2% increase in carbon contents of the planet's soils could offset 100% of all greenhouse gas emissions going into the atmosphere. That is a wonderful quote. I mean, it's not that a 2% increase in carbon is going to be easy, but you get great dividends for increasing the carbon content of our soils. And it's not that difficult to do. And it turns out that the things that you need to do in order to accomplish that have lots of co-benefits. So there's really no reason not to do this. So I wanted to get into some of the nitty-gritty. So we're taking cores to establish baseline carbon values on the various types of land use on the property. Here you have a coring instrument in place. We're also, the researchers are measuring tree growth, tracking sap flow and water consumption, which is a way of assessing carbon uptake by trees. So this is pretty cutting edge, state-of-the-art stuff that we hope to be generating the data to engage in good scientific discussion with lots of people and encourage other people to do it. Just since we've started this, we have met about half a dozen other locations throughout the Northeast that are doing similar projects. So we're part of a loose network, which is great. We can compare notes with each other and not have to reinvent the wheel every step of the way. This is a carbon flux tower that's down in our wetlands. Wetlands absorb and they also emit carbon. So we're measuring that flux so we get a better sense of the values over time and what the ranges are, and see how we're affecting that ranges by how we're managing those wetlands. In terms of our farming practices, we've been using cover crops, and we make lots of compost here. We accept municipal leaves from 5 surrounding towns. We mix it with vegetative waste and manure from the farm. We have a pretty good scale composting operation. So we're applying that to our soils. The thought is that if we can improve the soils, we can improve their ability to store more carbon. Now, there are some carbon emissions from this, so we also have to look into what I would call honest accounting. How much carbon are we releasing by some of these activities, and how much more carbon are we storing because of the use of some of these practices. Which leads me to our one of our grand experiments, bringing a cattle herd here to Duke Farm. So cattle are usually associated with part of the problem of climate change, and burps and farts from cows are a prime source of methane, but they don't have to just be part of the problem. By having rotational grazing in well-managed pastures, we're finding, or we're hoping to find, that cattle can help us manage the land better and improve the land's ability to store more carbon. So we have a herd of about 65 cattle right now. We're grazing them on about 300 acres. We hope to expand that to about triple that size of both cattle and acreage, and then to document what the impacts are. So we're very excited about this. It also turns out in terms of co-benefits, we're producing grass-fed beef. The cattle are healthier. We're producing healthier food, and it's not being shipped great distances. So we think that if we can document the actual carbon accounting as well as the co-benefits, hopefully we can encourage other people to change the kind of practices that right now make cattle ranching kind of a culprit. We think it doesn't have to be, and we hope to demonstrate that. Here's just kind of a little frivolous slide to demonstrate that. Farmer Mick converting his tractor to gas. Would that it was as simple as mounting a cow on top of your tractor. But we're also finding that the habitat value of these new pastures, we're documenting the use by a suite of rare birds, some of which we had thought were extirpated from this part of New Jersey, that we're now monitoring here. So this is coming full circle in terms of our mission. We're finding that the more we do things to address climate change, the more we address other stewardship issues, and the more we successfully pursue our overall mission. A lot of it just is how we use the land. Here's a slide here of our frontage along the Raritan River. This is the 3.5 miles of frontage. Now, when this was used for corn and soybeans, a lot of intensive petrochemical use to fertilize the soybeans, to plow the fields, and every time the fields were plowed, carbon was released from the soil. The soil was left to erode in the next storm. It was exacerbating downstream flooding. So by reversing that process, revegetating these areas, well, actually restoring these areas to break up the tile drains, restore some micro-topography, and then putting in native species of grasses with very substantial root structures, it not only helps address climate change, but it's helping to alleviate the flooding at least somewhat that affects downstream communities. This is a long-term research project. We are going to allow this area to revert to riparian forest. We've done some plantings that you can see in the lower right. Once this is a fully mature riparian forest, we hope to be able to demonstrate that it will be storing significant amounts of carbon and holding a lot of water as well. One of my favorite things around here is converting turf lawns to meadows. This was called the Great Lawn, and here's a slide of volunteers working with us to convert it into the Great Meadow. And the benefits are just obvious. The habitat value, we now have firefly festivals, we have bird usage and moth usage and butterfly usage, as well as small rodent usage, which attracts raptors. So we're really kind of restoring the natural cycle here. I even happen to think it's way prettier than a monoculture of turfgrass. So we've done that, and our visitors sometimes are at first skeptical. And I remember when I was first here, a couple of visitors asking me, "What happened to all those pretty green lawns you have? It just seems to be weeds now." And I would say, come back in another month or so. And they come back and they say, "Wow, what's that really pretty little orange flower that was attracting all the butterflies? Can I grow that in my backyard?" So, there's a lot of different ways to reach people. We've used armies of volunteers to plant the 340,000 trees and shrubs that I told you about. We're still having some problems with restoring the shrub layer. It turns out it's not as easy, and we have some new invasives to deal with. But the deer problem has largely been overcome, and the trees are regenerating like crazy, which is really good to see. Wetlands Restoration, working with the engineers and technical staff from the Natural Resource Conservation Service. This is an area that, in addition to taking out the tile drains, restoring some micro-topography, we decided to dig some vernal pools to kind of see what would happen in terms of water storage and wildlife habitat. And almost immediately, the wildlife came back. So it's turned an area that was, not terribly attractive into a wonderful area to bird. We have trails going through there, and now we're hoping to layer onto that some detailed information about the carbon storage that's taking place. Restoring the micro-topography was a bit of a challenge. We used a subsoiler to take out the tiles, and then you can see these little squiggly lines. This is over right behind our visitor center as we put some micro-topography back in. And that's designed to hold the water back a little bit and to have it infiltrate back into the ground rather than run off as sheet flow. So this is what Duke Farms looked like 10 years ago. There was absolutely no understory. The deer had munched everything native. What was left was either invasive stiltgrass or other horrible invasives. And by implementing a deer management program, we've been able to turn that into this. And although we don't yet have the data, I have to believe that that is storing much more carbon than dying trees and Japanese stiltgrass. So we will see. Stephanie and her colleagues will be doing the monitoring and establishing the test plots, so we'll be able to show definitively. And that's probably something that we really need to do so that we can encourage other people to undertake similar natural climate solutions. Here's a good shot of kind of the carbon footprint analysis that's ongoing throughout the property with the assistance of Rutgers faculty. I only have a couple more slides left, so I want to just summarize a couple of things you can do to address climate change. In addition to doing your own carbon footprint and reduction goals, conserving energy is always a good idea. Driving an electric or hybrid car, becoming a locavore to the maximum extent possible, using organic gardening or lawn methods, or better yet, get rid of your lawn and grow a meadow. Conserving water, because conserving water is conserving energy. Staying informed and spreading the word. And probably the last one is the most important. Supporting leaders who are willing to address climate change and support policies to address climate change, including incentives for natural climate solutions. This really is all about leadership, and it's not just ranting and railing at the people in our state capitals in Washington. We have an obligation to be leaders too, and to demand that other people follow suit and provide leadership. In the few minutes we have remaining, I want to just talk a little bit about New Jersey's reentry into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Compact. So here's a timeline. New Jersey was, a leader in setting up RGGI, enacting Global Warming Response Act and Global Warming Solutions Funding Acts that were funded by those carbon auctions. Then a new administration came in and said that RGGI was a horrible tax, and we had to get rid of it so we could promote business. So we withdrew from RGGI. It's taken us a couple of years to get back in, but the regulations that we needed to propose have been proposed. They're just about to be adopted. And so we're expecting to be back in RGGI and participate in the first carbon auction of 2020. And under our state laws and some of the changes that have been proposed, the carbon auction proceeds from RGGI will go 60% to our Economic Development Authority to support commercial, industrial, and institutional energy conservation and efficiency. Our Board of Public Utilities will use another 20% in the Clean Energy Fund to address low-income and moderate-income residential sector energy efficiency. And then our state DEP will get the other 20%, 10% to go to a grant program to local governments for renewable energy and energy efficiency and land use planning, with 10% to enhancing stewardship and restoration of state forests and tidal marshes in order to sequester carbon. So there's been a lot of discussion lately about changing that 10% to make it higher, but frankly, until we have some good data that shows that these natural climate solutions really are working to sequester carbon, I think that's going to be a tough sell. So we're hoping to be one of the vanguard projects that can persuade people. One of our recommendations from the group that met in Washington with Lauren Cooper was to increase that to 25%, but we're not there yet. But we do hope to be back in RGGI and have that funding mechanism flowing. I think that can help promote natural climate solutions along with the open space and farmland preservation funding that we have at the state, county, and municipal level. And I see it's 3:45, so I'm going to stop there and so we have plenty of time for questions. Thank you very much.
Michael, thank you so much for such an interesting overview of your work and a wide range of activities. We've gotten some really nice feedback from folks. Some folks just thanking you for the leadership in this space, and a kind of an inspiring range of activities and really forward-thinking uses of the land and leveraging the landscape that you have to inform a range of stakeholders. So thank you again for the presentation. One question here is, speaking of a range of stakeholders, what do you find to be one of the most effective ways to engage people that are unfamiliar with the topic of more on the land use topic? So, you mentioned farmers, but you also mentioned kind of the general public. But so for those that aren't familiar with the topic, how do you go about bridging into the carbon and the climate pieces?
I think actually getting them on the property and showing them what we're doing and integrating that into our public programs is really the best way. It's amazing when people come here, either as a casual visitor or to sign up for a program, and they get to see some of this, and all of a sudden you can watch the light bulbs going off, and they start asking, more specific questions. It's been a great way. We're very fortunate that we have high visitation. It turns out not only we were worried that it might be a constraint, it's actually an opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And again, we've talked about this in preparation for the webinars. Duke Farms really has a unique opportunity to engage people, and I wonder if folks from other states have similar examples or other opportunities to engage the public at a similar scale. And you mentioned a lot of activities that are happening with data collection and scientists and obviously restoration projects. Can you talk a little bit about how you leverage academic and conservation group expertise in these projects?
Well, one of the ways we do that is by hosting a number of workshops and forums here and encouraging people to come together and compare notes. And the foundation really believes we have an obligation to use this property for that purpose and to use our resources to kind of make mistakes that people can learn from. So in addition to getting things right and sharing those lessons, to show people kind of how not to do it. I think it was Thomas Edison that somebody asked him, weren't you frustrated that you failed to invent the light bulb 10,000 times? He said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And but for those 10,000 times, I wouldn't have actually invented it. So if we can kind of learn from our errors as well as our successes, and then share it with people when they come here for professional training or as casual visitors, that's really what our mission is all about.
That's great. We have a couple of questions here about some of the more specific on the activities. Somebody wanted to know more about your deer management program, and do you know if this was a hunting program or it used exclosures in that to make it successful?
We have a square mile, the park area exclosed, but that's only less than a third of the property. So we have a very scientifically designed hunting program. It's not a recreational hunting program. It is carefully selected hunters with carefully selected rules so that we're trying to harvest more does and knock down the population rates. And in an 8 to 10 year period, it's been extremely successful. It's also produced an awful lot of venison, which we pay to have butchered and donated to local food banks.
That's great. I know that that's an issue a lot of areas are dealing with. Another question here was about carbon sequestration, and does Duke Farms, and particularly maybe in light of Reggie coming online, if there's any plans to make revenues from carbon sequestration or to prepare yourself to take advantage of any offsetting opportunity if it comes down the line?
I think we would certainly explore the possibility of selling carbon credits, but unlike other landowners, we don't need to do that. But we are very conscious of the fact that we want to demonstrate things that other people can do, not just foundations with big endowments. So we want to kind of put ourselves in other people's shoes. So We have participated in federal programs and sold easements to the Wetlands Reserve Program and to the Grasslands Reserve Program. You know, and we also are selling solar renewable energy credits from our solar array. So I'd love to see a viable carbon program that we could participate in and encourage other people to do that.
Great, thank you for that. Another question we have is about your data itself, and is baseline data that you are collecting, is that available for public viewing? And do you have any past data that's available?
We've just started this process, so we don't have past data, but we do envision that we will make it available, and that there'll be scientific papers written about it using that data and shared with other people. But we're not quite there. I mean, as you know, when you set off on this kind of project, you don't move the needle on carbon storage that quickly. So our first goal is really to get really detailed baseline data so that we know if does the needle move. And then over the years, but we will certainly share that, and we will package it in a way that other people can use it. And we've already kind of discussed that with our colleagues at Rutgers.
Thanks so much. We also have a question here about if silvopasture, which we saw just the pasture lands, but if silvopasture or agroforestry systems are operational, or are there plans for those at Duke Farms?
There are plans for those. We have, you know, because of the historic landscape here, we have some areas of the property where we have some almost savanna type areas with 100-year-old oak trees and lots of field area in between them. So we are planning on launching some silvopasture operations there, and also maybe having some food forests. And you know, we've just started with our cattle herd, but we have a big forested area that's in between two big blocks of grassland, and we're currently trying to decide, you know, how do we balance things? I mean, obviously, we could maximize sequestering carbon if we did nothing else but just plant trees all over the property. And that would increase our contribution a little bit. But I think we view our real contribution as demonstrating a wide variety of techniques so that lots of other people can leverage that. So, you know, we'll look at particularly some of our lower quality forests, to maybe doing silvopasture in some of those.
Great, that's an insightful response. A question also is about any risks to carbon storage in your part of in your geography, and in particular where Duke Farms is located. Are there fire risks or other sorts of impending risks to carbon storage in your area that you're concerned about?
Well, I don't think it's the carbon storage that poses the risk. I think it's the land use. I mean, to the extent that we have dense forests that aren't managed properly, there's fire risk or grasslands. But the nice thing about doing this in a holistic way is if you properly manage these areas, I think it demonstrates a way to control those risks. One of the issues in New Jersey is that we have over-mature, overstocked forests that are real fire hazard. And they probably already kind of are past their maximum stage of storing carbon. So one of the things we hope to demonstrate is by better forestry management, you can actually lower the risks of fire. And even grassland management, by having rotational grazing, you know, we're going to have a better ability to control vegetative growth and to seek that sweet spot where we maximize carbon storage, but also get the other co-benefits we're looking for.
Thank you so much. Another question we have here that just popped up is, are you selecting more climate adapted tree species to future warming scenarios?
We have just started to do that. We actually just planted an array of black gums, tupelos, that are more prevalent in South Jersey. But we realized that if we're going to plant new trees here, we need to keep our eye on what's going to thrive in the future, in our future climate. So yeah, Just like I think Chicago is doing that in their parks, we're starting to selectively plant different species here. Not alien species or invasive species, but species that are moving closer to us, because we're going to have to think about replacing. As an example, we have a maple syrup operation here right now, which is wildly popular. We have a maple syrup festival. Well, the range of sugar maple trees is changing so that 30 to 50 years from now, we're not going to have new sugar maple trees here. So we have to think of alternatives to that and think about when you plant a tree that's going to live for 100 or 150 years, you need to think about what the climate's going to be when that tree is mature.
Thank you for that. Another question linking back to the changing climate and tree species and engaging with the public. How do you feel that the public is perceiving the need for some of these approaches like assisted seed migration or swapping out more or removing maladapted species? Do you think the public is kind of ready to think about land management in that way, or is that more in line with very like future oriented programs like Duke Farms or more or states that are already further along in their climate policies? Like, do you see that there's parts of the public that are really not there yet?
I think that's definitely true. There's clearly some work to be done to educate the public. And it's not that they have a problem with it, it's just that they are not aware of it. Some of this stuff is fairly esoteric and it's not kind of intuitive. So one of the nice things about a place like Duke Farms is that even the people who come here as casual visitors, the more they come and as we get them more engaged, their natural curiosity makes them start to ask more questions, and they sign up for programs, or they become a community gardener, and they start learning about how these things are connected. It also, I have to honestly say, it helps an enormous amount to have an administration that really wants to do something about climate change and is a genuine ally, rather than an administration that's trying to roll the clock back and deny everything.
Yeah, that's a useful transition to my last question. We are running out of time here. But I wanted to ask about maybe the role of Duke Farms in weathering changes in political leadership to be more of a consistent point of knowledge sharing in this topic area. And could you just elaborate a little bit on the role that Duke Farms has and had in this space, and maybe some of the challenges in changing policies and political leadership?
Well, it's interesting. Well, we're not an advocacy group. We are a nonprofit that seeks to promote, scientific inquiry and better stewardship. And we have those conversations with everyone. We don't know the politics of our visitors, but I can tell you that we get Republicans and independents and Democrats not only coming here, but we've had Republican legislators participate in our community garden program. And who have become organic gardeners, who wander around the property, and since they have to donate a certain number of hours, get involved in other things here. And I'd like to think that in a very kind of non-adversarial way, we change their outlook on, we're not beating them on the head and calling them names. They're kind of seeing stuff in action and realizing, hey, this is pretty cool. We should be doing more of this. And that's kind of our approach and our style.
That's great. That's really, really helpful. And it's 4 o'clock on the hour, so we'll probably wrap it up here. We try to end on the hour. But I want to take a moment to thank you, Michael, for this really informative presentation, really great imagery, and we appreciate you demonstrating all of the specific examples. We've had a range of topics in this webinar series, but not many have really been able to provide a case study approach and dig into how this really looks on the ground in some specific scenarios. So thank you so much for that. And I also want to remind
you. Thank you, Lauren. My pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to remind everyone that this is being recorded. So if you'd like to share this with a colleague or review this material later, and for anyone, of course, that signed up that was unable to join, this will be available. And we will share, we've gotten a couple questions about the slides. So we will share a copy of the slides and also probably a link to Duke Farms as well, so you can learn a little bit more on your own. And again, if you're interested in joining the next webinar, please feel free to register and you'll get some reminders. So with that, and thank you to everyone who joined us this afternoon. We really appreciate your time and for joining us in this online community that we've been forming. So again, Michael, thank you. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, everyone, have a great afternoon.